Welcome to the weekly Forex forecast for the week of May 25th. We had a fantastic trading week in the Discord group last week. Tons of wins, also a few losses. I try to be as transparent as I can here on my channel, so you guys are in the right place. Let's get right into this week's Forex forecast. So starting off with the daily chart on the DXY, we've seen two reactions, actually three technically, off of this daily area of demand. Now with supply and demand trading, usually tested zones don't work great, but that's why it's important to understand the higher time frame context and why did this area of demand be respected multiple times? Well, it's very, very straightforward. We have not only this weekly zone in control, this is a weekly zone from back here, nice rally-based rally area of demand, but more importantly, these black dotted lines, that is our monthly area of demand, and that is why I think we have seen more strength in the DXY, and we've actually kind of based out here, which is a good sign, right? We want to see basing out here because now if we break this high, we will have some sort of upward trend line on the weekly, which will be evidence to suggest we will be pulling back up to that weekly area of supply. As far as the 1 hour chart goes here, technically a 1 hour trend, I'm actually going to get rid of it. Technically a trend on the to the upside on the 1 hour chart, but it just really looks sideways here. So not a lot to go off of here, but on the 4 hour time frame, we have a trend line that has been beautifully respected. So you can see our trend line is drawn from here to here. That is our trend line, and all of this price action here is our 4 hour trend line being respected. So really, as long as this 4 hour trend line continues to hold on the DXY, which it is right now, I will admit it's not looking too great, but it is technically holding. As long as it continues to hold, we could expect to see the US dollar continue to rise. And if we break the trend line, that could be signs that the US dollar might be pulling back maybe for a week. So stay tuned, and we will be discussing what could potentially be happening in the future here with this 4 hour trend line. Moving on to the forecast for the Euro US dollar, I talked about this daily downward trend line last week. That is definitely a bearish sign as we broke that low, created a nice daily downward trend line. Not really any clear demand down below. This is pretty much already tested, but I think there's really nothing to stop price from continuing to fall here on the euro. I will admit that it is a little bit overextended. If we just throw a channel tool on this trend line, you can see we're actually sitting at the bottom end of that channel. So I think we could see maybe a little bit of strength in the euro to push back towards the 50% mark, but ultimately with this daily downward trend line, it is definitely a sign of weakness here on the Euro US dollar. As far as trading it goes now, we have a couple of options. So this 4 hour demand zone, this is one I've been pointing out in the daily market breakdown videos for the members and in the forecast. It's a great zone. But I was also saying it's probably only going to be good for a quick move. And I mean, if we zoom in here, we did see somewhat of a nice move off of this zone. Your take profit probably should have already been hit. I'm not expecting to see a massive move off of the zone based off of the higher time frame forces in play. So as long as this demand's holding, you could technically look for 15-minute time frame longs, but I would be very aggressive with trade management. If you were bearish, this is our 4 hour trend line guide for day trading shorts on a 15-minute time frame. And if we break this demand, any supply zone there would be a great shorting opportunity for swing traders. So all going to revolve around this 4 hour supply or 4 hour demand rather, and the 4 hour downward trend line. We did catch a beautiful 1 hour trade here, very quick one. I was telling the members, if you want to get involved in this trade, it's got to be an aggressive trade management. As you can see on the screen right now, that's a clip of me calling this trade out before it took place in the daily market breakdown video for the Diamond members, and we actually created a 1 hour downward trend line now. And this supply zone was beautifully respected, not a trading setup for me, but it was beautifully respected. At this point, if you day trade on a 5-minute time frame, as long as this 1 hour trend line's holding, you could justify 5-minute time frame shorts. If you're bullish the euro, I'm not really seeing any decent setups. I mean, that one was already traded. So at this point, if we remove the trend line and preferably this supply as well, any demand there would be a pretty nice trading setup to get in long on the euro. But again, we want to be aggressive with trade management, just like we were here. And I mean, I'm happy we were doing that because this zone was removed after we already got a nice move off of the zone. All right, moving on to the forecast for gold. I'm not going to zoom into the weekly or to the daily because you can just see on the screen now, it's technically a weekly trend to the upside, but we're really just kind of basing out here. No high, no low created on the weekly yet. And the daily chart's just really sideways. So not a lot to go off of here. on gold, but we did catch a beautiful 1 hour demand zone setup. Again, called out in the daily market breakdown video. Wider stop, aggressive trade management, and I mean, I'm glad we did so as well, because we came back in for a second test of the zone, and I think we could break it. I really don't trust tested zones. This trade was called out again for the members in the Diamond membership in the daily market breakdown video. If you want to trade alongside myself and the members, join the Diamond membership, where you will have access to the 38-page supply and demand zone PDF, which will be your complete trading guide, the daily market breakdown videos, which are forecasts that I release every single night for the members to trade alongside myself, step-by-step video lessons A to Z covering everything you need to know on supply and demand trading, the Sunday strategy Zoom session where members submit homework, and it's an interactive 1 hour call where we go over all of your homework and every trading related question, private access to myself inside of our private Discord group where I answer all of your trading related questions. And finally, the Sunday live stream forecast where we break down over 30 markets together. And it's not just me. Here are some of the members and some of their trades they've been taking lately. Absolutely killing it. And we also have some amazing reviews from some of the past members sharing their experience within the group. So if you're ready to trade alongside myself and the community, join the Diamond membership today. Links in the description down below. So really nothing to go off of here on the 1 hour chart. If you must trade at the zone again, you have to be looking for confirmation on a 5-minute time frame. I kind of have maybe a feeling we could push up, because on the 4 hour time frame, you can see we have a clear area of liquidity above. This purple box is liquidity. The red box is our supply zone. So I think we could easily be pushing up to target this liquidity to contact our 4 hour area of supply at 4604, where we can then see a good move to the downside. So that will be our 4 hour supply, and that will be our target for long trades as well, if you do feel like holding a little bit longer. And going back to this trade, the reason we got out of this trade early was because I was telling the members, due to the market conditions with everything that's going on in the world right now, I'm not going to name it. I just don't want to get banned on YouTube or whatever. Aggressive trade management on markets like gold and oil are preferred, because I mean, we barely targeted the high here. Nice little quick trade. And that's what separates the professional traders from the non-professional traders, is understanding when to be aggressive with trade management. We didn't want to be holding this trade up here with a stop still down below and potentially get stopped out when price went 2 to 1 or 1 to 1, whatever you wanted to set your take profit at, because Trump says a tweet, something happens in the Middle East, and all of a sudden gold goes to the downside. And same thing for shorts. That 4 hour supply zone, we want to be aggressive with trade management as well. Moving on to the forecast for the S&P 500 weekly trend line to the upside. I've been talking about this for a couple of weeks now. We are not too overextended. I mean, I think we could see another nice leg up to contact the upper end of that channel, where then we could say we're pretty overextended. I will admit we're a little bit overextended right now, as we are just peaking above the 50% mark. But I mean, we've seen, price, especially with the trend line from back here, contact the upper end of the channel, and then we see a fall to the upside. That's why we fell here on the S&P 500, in my opinion. So we are a little overextended. We could expect a pullback, but honestly, I think we will get that next leg up to push towards the upper end of that channel. As far as trading it goes now, on the 1 hour chart, we have a very nice 1 hour trend line. This is a couple supply zones I had on my chart before they took place. Trade off of that multiple times. I personally don't short the S&P 500 ever, but our zones are being beautifully respected here that I've had on my chart before they took place as well. You can go back and watch last week's forecast to confirm that as well. All the evidence is there. So I was expecting this zone to break, especially after getting the test, and both of the zones broke. And when they broke, we created a nice 1 hour trend line to the upside. We will throw a channel tool on this trend line to see exactly where we are at. And we are basically sitting right at that 50% mark right now. We've actually reacted off of it many times. So at this point, this is our 1 hour trend line guide for 5-minute time frame longs. So as long as this trend line's holding, 5-minute time frame longs or 1-minute time frame longs are going to be good as well. I think, we're sitting below the 50% mark. I'd rather be doing it below the 50% mark, and as long as this trend line's holding, anywhere in this area is our preferred area to look for 5-minute time frame longs to the upside. And then if we break the trend line, then we want to stop looking for longs and wait for the trend line to continue, or maybe get in short at a supply zone. As far as the 4 hour chart goes here, we have that very obvious all-time high over here. So that is something else I will be monitoring, because if we can break the all-time high, we will have a trend line here, and that 4-hour trend line will definitely signal strength, and we can continue to look for longs on a 15-minute time frame. Also, what I'll be watching out for is to see if this all-time high gets removed. Any demand that removes that, it's going to be a nice trading opportunity that I will definitely be interested in. So that's what I'd be doing on the S&P 500. Moving on to the forecast for the USDJPY, we have that beautiful weekly trend line, and it was beautifully respected here. The trend line is drawn from here to here. This is a reaction off of our properly drawn trend line. So I do prefer longs on the USDJPY, but on the 4-hour chart and the 1-hour chart, look at how bad these time frames are. Just chugging along, no explosive moves, no areas of demand. Like, there's just nothing here as far as my analysis goes. So as much as I want to come on here and tell you guys awesome setups every single time I do these videos, I'm just not going to do that. I don't feel comfortable pointing out anything on the USDJPY, so I'm simply not. I try to be as transparent as possible on my channel. Like I mentioned in the intro, we had some beautiful trades last week, some great winning trades. We also had a few losses, like on the Aussie US dollar. So I try to be as transparent as possible. And if you guys do appreciate that, if you appreciate me not pointing out any of this junk here just for the sake of making a video like a lot of these people do, hit that subscribe button. If you're new to my channel, I do these forecasts every single week. And hit that like button if you guys appreciate me and the videos. Much, much appreciated. So as far as the end goes, I'm not seeing anything. I don't feel comfortable pointing anything out to my subscribers. Moving on to the forecast for the GBPUSD. Lots of sideways action here on the weekly time frame. Broke below the trend line. Really nothing to go off of on the weekly chart. Even on the daily here, I really just am not seeing anything. What I'll be monitoring is this low and this high, because that will give us some sort of trend. It is potentially possible we get a trend without breaking the lows and highs. That's something else I will be watching out for, but I'm just pointing out the higher time frames here. There's not a lot to go off of. So what that means, quick little lesson here, when we don't have the higher time frame trends, we got to be somewhat aggressive with trade management depending on the time frame that you guys are looking to trade. Even on the 4-hour chart, look how I don't have any zones here. And again, I respect my subscribers. I'm not going to point out anything that doesn't fall in line with my chain analysis. A lot of people pointing out zones here, and I understand, but as far as how I do things here, I really don't see a whole lot as far as zones go on the 4-hour chart. The 1-hour chart is just a little bit more promising. On the 1-hour time frame here, we had a very nice upward trend line, and that trend line was removed. Unfortunately, not any zones that removed it. So what I'll be watching for this week on the GBPUSD is to see if we can remove this high. If we can remove this high, we will have a 1-hour trend line, and that will be our guide for 5-minute time frame longs. If we push back down to the downside, we have a decent little 1-hour zone down below at 1.33. That will be our pullback entry for a long trade. Remember, we are bullish on the dollar based on the macro charts. So I don't think we should be looking for a massive trade here. If you get involved in this trade, look for an aggressive trade management trade, 1-to-1, 1-to-2. Move your stop up, move your stop to break even. Get out of the trade as soon as you can, because I don't think we're going to get a massive move. What I think we could get, small move, and then a break. But there is money to be made to the upside, just like we did on the euro last week. There also is an older 1-hour supply over here. It's pretty old at this point, but what I like about it is there's a pretty clear area of resistance here, but it doesn't mean I'm just going to take this trade. I want to see a reaction off this resistance. Since it's so old, I want to make sure that there is liquidity here, and we just need to simply see a reaction off of it to prove there will be stop losses here right before our supply zone, and that's where we could get a nice little short trade to the upside or to the downside. But again, it is an older zone. It's a good zone, but it's an older zone, so that's why we are looking for that liquidity reaction first here on the GBPUSD. All right, moving on to the forecast for the USDCAD. This is where I live. This is where I'm from. This is where my family's been living for 300 years. Just letting you guys know a little bit about me. Where are you guys from? Let me know your story in the comments down below. I'm always interested to hear from you guys, so please let me know. I'd be interested to hear. As far as trading the USDCAD goes, you guys know we caught that beautiful trade from that zone. That was a big one there, and bullishness on the US dollar allowed that to be a bigger trade. I was waiting for that 4-hour demand zone down below. I still think it is decent, but I would like to see some liquidity before the zone. We do have a trend line here. It's basically irrelevant at this point. I will keep it on my chart to see, but it's pretty much irrelevant because you can see we are pushing. We've been sitting above the 50% mark almost the entire time, and we were actually peaking above the upper end of that channel. So just based off of the concept of overextendedness, we could see a pullback maybe towards the mean again, where I think we could be headed. Again, I think we could see a pullback before. Where I think we could be headed is this 4-hour supply zone over here. And this is a very old zone, very, very old. But there's two things I like about well, three things. I like the zone, a little hidden basing. The move away is very, very good. And this purple box, that's our liquidity. But it's not really liquidity yet. We have to see another reaction off of it, proving there are stop losses here. And that would be a nice short trade to the downside for a quick trade. So that's the first thing I like about the zone is the liquidity before it. What's even better is that 4-hour zone is sitting right inside of our weekly area of supply at 1.38. Now let me be very clear. The supply above in the weekly chart is much better. I think we will see the bigger move off of that zone. Ultimately, I think both of these will be removed, but I think we could see small moves off of them. And again, there's money to be made on small moves. That's one mistake I made in my trading career, is not capitalizing on those small moves and understanding when we can do that. So the 4-hour supply is sitting right inside the weekly supply, which makes it a higher odds situation. That's why I think we could see a small move, or maybe somewhat of a bigger move to the downside off of that area of supply. Alrighty, moving on to the forecast for the Aussie US dollar. Weekly trend line to the upside. I think we will be pushing back towards a trend line since we are bullish on the US dollar. As far as trading it goes now, like I talked about in the intro, we had some fantastic winning trades this past week, but a couple of our zones failed as well. So just full transparency here on my channel. So pretty much sideways price action. Whenever I see two zones broken like this back to back, I usually stay away. And I mean, the sideways price action is making me stay away as well. So I'm really not seeing a whole lot of trading decisions to go off of on the 1-hour chart. As far as the 4-hour chart goes, we have a 4-hour supply above. It barely qualifies. I won't get into my rules here, but it just barely qualifies as an area of supply. So if you want to trade at the zone, very aggressive trade management off of the zone, because I think it'll only be a small move. And what I actually would prefer, I personally don't day trade, but if you're a day trader, the preferred strategy here is to look for 15-minute or even 5-minute time frame confirmation on the day trading timeframes once we contact that area of supply. If we do continue to the downside, what I'll be watching for is a break of this low here, because then we will have a nice trend line to the downside, and that will be our guide for 15-minute time frame shorts with very clear profit margin down to this 4-hour demand at 0.697. We have an area of liquidity before it as well, so it is a little bit of an older zone, so I'd like to see a reaction off of this support as well, proving there are stop losses here, and then I think we could get a nice little 1-to-1, maybe a 2-to-1 trade off of the zone. You definitely want to be aggressive with trade management here since we are bullish on the dollar, but I think if we do break that low, that's where we could be headed, and that's where we could switch to a potential long trade on the Aussie US dollar. Alrighty, on to the forecast for the USD Swiss. Looking at the daily chart here first, looks like some sort of trend line fake out. If we do go to the downside, I think we will be targeting the liquidity, pulling back down to that daily demand. That's where I think we could see a pretty nice rally from that daily zone down below. So if you are shorting, again, I would be somewhat aggressive with trade management, but ultimately we could push down to that daily zone. So there is potential for a nice big trade to the downside. And on the 4-hour chart, I've been pointing out this supply zone as well for the members, and you can actually see it was in my video last week. And nice trade. I personally avoided this one because I'm bullish on the dollar, but nice little trade to the downside here. Definitely probably should be out of this trade at this point. And the reason I avoided it is because the clearer, much better supplies above at 0.79. But I've talked about this many times. Sometimes the worst zones can fail and the best zones, or sorry, the worst zones can work and the best zones can fail. This is actually a good zone. I'm not saying anything against the zone, but that one is much better for a couple of reasons. So at this point, if we break this high, any demand there, or sorry, if we break the supply, any demand there would be a potentially nice trading setup. And then as far as the 1-hour chart goes here, another beautiful trade. I mean, what a week. Pointed out in this daily market breakdown video trade right there, bullishness on the US dollar, beautiful trading setup after a couple reactions off of the zone, as you can see on the screen right now, called out before in the daily market breakdown video, and one of our members got involved in that trading setup as well. So congratulations to them. As far as trading it goes now, we actually have a trend to the downside rather. No trend line though, unfortunately, but we have a new supply zone above at 0.788. So if we do get a pullback, that's where I think we could see a small move to the downside. I wouldn't be looking for a massive trade off the zone or anything, but I think we could definitely see small move off the zone. And if we remove the supply, any demand there would be our preferred long trading setup. So really all going to revolve around this 1 hour supply on the USD Swiss. Moving on to crude oil, nothing to go off of on the weekly and nothing to go off of on the daily. It's been up and down, just like a ping pong ball, just absolutely crazy. I've been waiting for this 4 hour supply zone above for a quick short trade, targeting liquidity. I still think it's a nice trading setup, but like I've been saying on crude oil, you definitely want to be aggressive with trade management here on crude oil. Now, on the 1 hour chart, beautiful reaction off of our 1 hour supply. Again, called out beforehand in the daily market breakdown video. There's the proof on the screen right there. So beautiful trade off of that zone. A little bit of a bigger move than I expected, and the reality is I wasn't looking for a massive trade here, but based on the time of the day when this trade was filled, I happened to be able to be active, and I mean, got more than I expected. So I was only looking for a quick move, but time of the day helped me be active with this trade management, and it worked out great. As far as trading it goes now, we basically have this 1 hour downward trend line to the downside, but we are pretty overextended as we are below the 50% mark. So if we push up more towards the trend line, that will be our guide for 5-minute time frame shorts with this 1 hour downward trend line. And if you are bullish, we are basically waiting for either this trend line to break or that supply to break, and any demand zone that breaks these areas of supply or the trend line, those are going to be our potential long opportunities here on crude oil. Alrighty, moving on to the Bitcoin chart. Last but certainly not least, monthly demand is in control here on Bitcoin. I think we will be targeting these supply zones above, so I am expecting to see some strength in Bitcoin, but we are basically at a hiccup bump in the road right now at this daily supply. You can go back, watch my previous forecast to see I've had the zone on my chart for a while now, and that's where we have blatantly turned around. I think we will see some strength here, but I mean, we have trends to the downside. I'd pretty much ignore the 1 hour chart right now. It's just very overextended. But on the 4 hour chart, you can see we have a beautiful 4 hour trend line to the downside. So if you're bearish on Bitcoin, let me just zoom in a little bit here. If you're bearish on Bitcoin, this is our 4 hour trend line guide for 15-minute time frame shorts. If we remove the trend line, any demand there would be our potential long trading setup on Bitcoin. And if you are going to short with this trend line, we have a lot of profit margin to the downside. You could really be riding this trend all the way down. There is a liquidity before this area of demand. It's kind of an older zone. So just like kind of like those other pairs, those currency pairs that we were talking about, I want to see a reaction off this liquidity. That would make this demand zone even higher odds at 69,000. And based off of the fact that we have monthly higher time frame macro demand and control, I think we get a nice trade from the zone. I wouldn't be super aggressive with trade management off of this zone. So for now, all really going to revolve around this 4 hour trend line to the downside. And then if we remove the trend line, any demand zones there would be good for potential longs. If you guys want access to my full-length forecast, join the Diamond membership where you will have access to that as well as my daily market forecast, the full course supply and demand PDF, and much, much more. Make sure you guys subscribe so you can catch next week's forecast as well. And I always appreciate a like. Thank you guys, and I'll see you in the next video.